Good evening and welcome. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and I'm your host, Winifred Adams. I'd like to share with you tonight a very special broadcast, and I am requiring your participation as well. So I appreciate all those that will be listening and anyone that wants to weigh in with their questions tonight. This is a special edition, and I have the honor of bringing in a special guest who is very intent on changing the framework of what's happening in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office currently. And so this is a special edition because we're going to learn more about what goes on from the inside out, why that's happening right now, perhaps, and the changes that can be made that might make a bridge to a more neutral, tolerant, and effective force altogether. So tonight, I'd like to welcome in a special guest, and this is a former Captain Mike Bornman of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He's known for some of his programs that he's created, and he has an incredible track record, actually, that I want to share with you before I bring him on. Recently, first of all, we've started off seeing a change in America, and a swift change. We have riots happening across the country. We have people polarized on either side of the fence. And as you know, here at Making Life Brighter, we believe in neutrality. And I'm standing in that position tonight as we bring forth some information that maybe not everybody has yet, but information that we can all consider. Because when we can consider all points of view, we have an opportunity to come back into a cooperative position. So our special guest tonight, Captain Bornman, he was tasked in the beginning with helping to create special programs within. And as he progressed through his career, he was known for helping create educational programs for tolerance, programs for inmates, programs that still stand. And he has a background of investigation work, and he worked with the FBI. He worked alongside with creating investigations with the IRS and so on. He had quite a track record in how he formulated different bureaus within the department, and many of these focused on swift investigations, and including those that factored into the officers themselves. So he has a unique position of understanding that I think that you'll find appreciative tonight. I'd like you to follow along with us, and you can follow along with his profile as well. So he has a particular point of view, and he is now running for election for the Sheriff's Department in Los Angeles County soon. And we're having this discussion because he has a strong sentiment about the changes that need to be made and why they need to come to pass. So I'd like to bring that to your attention tonight because we have an opportunity for change. And with the recent litmus that's happening in our country, we have some things that we need to talk about and consider. So you can follow along on his website, as you can see here, and let me bring him in and welcome in Captain Mike Bornman. Thank you for
Hi.
having
Hi,
time with
Winifred.
us
Thanks for
tonight.
having
Thank
me.
you.
Yep.
So let's start with your background. Let's go through exactly what it is that you've created in your history of work, starting with your investigative work. Because you have sort of an eye for seeing things and research, how did that affect what you did as you entered into the force?
Oh boy, that's a long story that goes back 36 years. I joined in January of 1980. I like to call it 1850, but was a long time ago. And like most everybody else, I started out in the jails. I started out at Men's Central Jail. And ultimately, I went to my first patrol assignment, which was Firestone. The station's not even there anymore. It was that long ago. But that's where I started to learn the art of investigative science, where I was a patrol deputy. And then ultimately I became a station detective where I handled everything from petty theft to attempted murder at the station. Um, that was kind of where I cut my teeth on investigations because it was a very fast station. I had at least 30 new cases a month, that would come my way. It was a pretty intense experience. And then I made the mistake of promoting to sergeant, and I went to another patrol station. I worked there as the watch sergeant and field sergeant for about a year and a half. And then a big investigation came along back in the day. I don't know if you remember, but it was called Operation Big Spender, where people in the sheriff's department who work narcotics units were suspected of stealing millions of dollars of money that they were seizing from narcotics cases. They that I got called and they lied to me. They said that it would take about 6 to 8 weeks to get it completed. And by the time it was over, I dragged myself out of there a year and a half later. It was, I'll tell you what, it was horrific to me because they asked me to come down. They invited me to see if I wanted to be in this task force. And it was the sheriff's department and the federal government, basically, U.S. Attorney's Office, IRS, and the FBI. They were involved by that point, and that was under Sheriff Sherman Block. And I went to a secret undisclosed location where they showed me a list of like 50 names, and I knew almost every name on the list. I'm like, oh, this is baloney. If they're suspected of this, it's not going to be anything. I'll be back in 6 to 8 weeks. Well, by the time it was over, I was a sadder but wiser man. Everybody on that list ended up either losing their job or going to federal prison. And some of their family members went to federal prison. One of my best friends at the time went to federal prison. It's my whole thing is, if I don't care who you are, if you do something that is illegal or unprofessional like that, the chips fall where they fall. Nobody made them do that. But that was something, because then you're pitting yourself against seasoned professional cops when it comes to doing investigative work. And, it's a cat and mouse game, but the mice lost on that one. But from there, I worked a number of different assignments I can go into. You want me to keep yammering on, or what do you want?
No, yes, I do actually, because I'd like to set a precedent for how that you lined up to what you're about to say that's
Hmm.
important now, and that
Okay.
is that you have this strong background of investigative work, and it was substantial. It it really brought out perhaps some of the reasons that we're seeing this the strong rioting and other things today, that there's people are having opposition to things, but there's also a strong sussing out of people that are not maybe here for our best interest as a country too, and there's both
Mm-hmm.
sides to that fence. So you're someone that's seen both sides of it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Well, after I left that investigation, it was winding down, and I went to a unit called what was that? Criminal Investigations Bureau. I was there for a while, and then I got recruited to go to the Internal Affairs Bureau, which is the administrative side of investigations involving allegations of misconduct by department personnel. I worked in that unit for 5 years. One of the first task forces I was assigned to was deputy involved shooting and deputy involved force cases. So when there was a shooting or a significant use of force, I would roll out with another team member anytime, day or night, anywhere in the county, and start investigating that case right from when it happened. Um, that as well. I mean, that's a tough job. You're actually looking at your own people, which I absolutely, I love the sheriff's department. I love the personnel. I love the deputies and the work they do, but somebody has to have oversight, right? You just can't trust that they're always going to do right, and be blindsided when they don't.
how do you be
Um,
objective about that? Because each case is unique. Everything, the circumstances leading up to something like that can be different case to case, and it can be ambiguous almost.
well,
How do you take a position on that?
well, you don't take a position. Objectivity is the name of the game, right? And that's the rule. You go in and basically you're a fact finder. You don't make any decisions one way or the other. And you know what I learned early on, not only from that assignment, but the one before with Operation Big Spender, which we called Arco Narco, by the way, because we were squirreled away in the Arco Towers, and we thought it was a secret location, but everybody knew about it, and they called it Arco Narco. But you have to be objective. That's just the rule. And I can tell you that I know that more careers were saved by my working them than destroyed and ruined. Because my philosophy was, if you didn't do it, I'm the first person you want to see walk in the door. If you did do it, I'm the last person you want to see walk in the door, because I'll find the facts out either way. And again, it's cat and mouse. You've got people that have been cops for a long time, and there's a mistake of the heart and there's a mistake of the mind, right? So people that make mistakes of the mind, they get more latitude from the brass up the chain of command. But those that have like an evil heart, or they're doing something stupid and they know it, I mean, sorry, that's the way it goes. But
Well, there
um,
needs to be a check and balance, and that's basically what we're seeing right now in Los Angeles,
mhm,
however different people wanna say what side of the fence that's on. The check and balance for some people is the military's come out. For other people, it's the National Guard came out, and when we
mhm,
spoke the other day, you were saying there's, kind of the LAPD was handling that situation.
mhm.
Let's pause for a minute on your bio and go into this for just a second. Let's discuss for the people the difference between the sheriff's department and the LAPD specifically, so that they have an understanding of those two different groupings.
Okay. Well, there are 88 uh, cities in the county of Los Angeles. And many of those cities have their own police department, like LAPD, Burbank, Glendale, San Fernando. They all have their own police department within the county. Out of those 88 cities, 48 of them contract with the sheriff's department for police services. So you'll have like Santa Clarita, Altadena, the other stations that contract with us. But let's say you're a citizen of the city of Los Angeles. You've got the wonderful LAPD as your police agency. But a lot of folks don't realize that you actually still have a sheriff, and you actually vote for sheriff, when the time comes. And I've had people that are really well educated. They're like, oh, I live, in LA. I don't vote for sheriff. It's like, well, yeah, you do. But what's going on is LAPD, they have their own certified law enforcement agency, which is LAPD. Overseeing that, or overarching that, is the LA County Sheriff's Department. The sheriff of LA County wears 5 stars on his collar, and that's indicative of the fact that chiefs of police for other cities wear 4, right? So when somebody, let's say, has to call for mutual aid, like Glendale doesn't call LAPD or Burbank, they call LA County Sheriff's Department, and the Sheriff's Department is the mutual aid coordinator. So that's how you get other agencies involved. And frankly, that's how LA County Sheriff's Department became involved in some of this stuff early on in the city of LA.
Interesting. So then, what is your opinion currently on the handling of the downtown incident, and why do we not see more of the sheriff's department down there? Instead, the National Guards come out, and then the Marines have come. What's happening?
Well, that's a mixed bag of stuff. I think that the first 3 or 4 days, law enforcement was caught flat-footed, and I would not give them a really good grade. I think that there's two sides to this argument, and one of them is you have people that are upset about the federal government coming in and enforcing immigration law, right? That's that side, and people are upset because family members are getting rounded up and they're not hearing from them, and they're going out and they're protesting, but they're doing it right. They're doing it as is per the Constitution, and God bless them. That's their right to do that, and I'll defend them all day long to do it. The problem comes in when you have these outside agitators come in, that a lot of them are paid. They'll come in, and what they do is they end up usurping what the other people are doing. They hijack the message from the peaceful people, and they start throwing Molotov cocktails and dropping boulders off the side of freeways onto radio cars. I'm sure you've seen that. Attacking the police, throwing things at them. I know there was somebody that was shooting at the police early on, and that's where it really gets muddled. And I like I said, the first couple of days, man, I'll tell you what, if I was sheriff at the time, I would have cracked down on that agitator group quickly and decisively, and gotten as many of them as I could, and just keep the pressure on them. But for
How
whatever
would you
reason,
do that? How
how
do
would I
you
do
go
that?
about that? Yeah.
I would do that with my well-trained, highly professional LA County Sheriff's deputies. They know what they're doing. They've been through this before back in 2020, and it's just typical skirmish line stuff, and how you parse one group away from the other, and you just start getting that group in hand. The problem is, I've been told early on that LAPD and the sheriffs were asked to stand down, keep it cool, don't interfere too much, don't make a whole lot of arrests, let's just let it simmer. And unfortunately, it's just about like anything else. The other side didn't see it as being nice; they saw it as being weak. And they started calling in the troops. Next thing you know, you got more and more of them, and there's more and more anarchy out there. Then they start looting, and then they start burning, and they start destroying property. They start attacking the cops. And lost in this again is that whole group, the large group of people that just want to protest peacefully.
Mhm.
And like I said, the message is hijacked, and then I kind of wish. I know the president's the one that federalized the state guard, but I wish that would have been coming from the sheriff's office. He could have requested it, because that way they would be under the sheriff's jurisdiction. And in fact, I do. I welcome them being there, because LAPD and the sheriff's department are so woefully understaffed right now that they need the help. They really do. I mean, you're talking about something that they have to basically be out there 24 hours a day, right? You can't just go out and mix with the crowd and then go home, and then everybody meets the next day at the play yard. You have to stay out there, and you have to maintain control, and you have to patrol the streets. You have to cordon things off. And I know for the sheriff's department, we're like 25% down on personnel. That's
So
about.
we began this point of this interview specifically for this message for your upcoming campaign, because you see that there is a deficiency that's happening, but the deficiency isn't just a little deficiency. It could actually bring the whole thing down if it's not handled or turned around, because there's an attrition rate that's so outrageous right now. Let's get into that. Tell us about the attrition rate and what's happening.
Let's talk about attrition. Attrition is the annual reduction of people based on their retirement, or leaving service. And historically, we've been able to keep up our numbers. If you lose 500 people a year through attrition, you have hopefully been able to hire 500 more people and more, because we're kind of down, but we haven't been able to hire people. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But
Such
like,
as what would be
um,
those reasons?
well, several years of anti-cop rhetoric, defund the police, all cops are bees, F the police, all of those groups. I mean, it really starts to wear on people. Cops don't just um, support the community; they are the community. They're from the community. We are the people. We are them. We are us, right? And to be singled out for doing your job. I mean, how many people do you know outside military service that get attacked and murdered just because of the job they do?
Right.
Our people get attacked and murdered just for being cops. And you have what I consider to be very let's put it this way. I was going to say weak leadership on the sheriff's department right now, but I don't think there is leadership. I think that the current sheriff is trying to manage the department, and he's doing a horrible job of it. What do leaders do? They're forward thinking. They're engaged. They get their people to become the best that they can be. They encourage greatness from their people, and I don't see any movement whatsoever. I mean, it's just they're treading water, and the water's getting deeper, and it's up to their nostrils, and it's not working out. I know for a fact that the majority of line staff are absolutely, the morale is probably the worst it's ever been in my experience, and I've been around the sheriff's department like 45 years or so.
And
It's
so
just, go ahead.
what does this do then for the county of Los Angeles? Let's say that you have this attrition rate goes on for another year or two. you can't hire enough back. If you step into the position you want to step into, which is basically revamping this leadership all the way around,
Hmm.
what is it that you will do that will bring that morale up and change the game in Los Angeles for the sheriff's department?
Yeah, well, you know what? The first you have to stop the bleeding with our people, and I was just going to say real quickly. Over the last 3 years, we had 13 people associated with the sheriff's department commit suicide. You also had the annual run that takes place in Baker to Vegas, which is a national symbol of camaraderie for law enforcement. 20 of the sheriff's teams boycotted directly because of how they feel about the current sheriff. Unheard of. I never heard of anything like that. Now the attrition rate, unheard of. It's just out of control. So the first thing I would do is let the people know that I really give a crap about them. Pardon my French, but they have to know that you're there to lead, and you train them to become these law enforcement professionals, and you don't treat them like liabilities, which is what they're doing now in the department. They treat them like liabilities instead of assets. And the people are afraid to act and react. They're afraid to be proactive. They're afraid they're going to get in trouble. They're afraid they're going to get disciplined. They're afraid they're going to get fired. And when a cop does something really good on the sheriff's department these days, it's crickets chirping. You don't hear anything. But let somebody do one thing that's a little out of line, and man, the power of the sheriff's office comes down and crushes them. And you don't treat people like that. You don't treat professionals like that. You train them, and you expect them to do a job, and you let them go do the job. You unhandcuff them, and you let them know that if they make a mistake, we'll work through it.
Right.
As long as they don't have that evil heart that I talked about before, because that's just that's the way it goes. You don't belong in the
Yeah.
sheriff's department. But
We
that's go ahead.
we the people would like to see the evil heart gone. I think we the people are educated enough to recognize the difference. And I do feel, as a person in this country, that we do appreciate that work just like we appreciate the military out there.
Hmm.
However, like you say, we're not seeing it. Now, yesterday, as an example, we saw a huge parade in appreciation of the Army and its 250-year celebration. So, when was the sheriff's office formed exactly?
When was the sheriff's office what
Formed?
founded?
Founded?
1850. The
1850. And so,
the same year that the state of California became a state. Been a long time, right? And God bless them. I loved seeing that parade, and she didn't see any pyrotechnics going off, or anybody attacking them, or telling them "f the military," or defund the military. It's They're doing well now. I appreciate them. Now, when it comes to having them deploy in your county, right? That's a different thing. That brings it home to you.
how do
But
you feel about that actually? How do you feel about the deployment of the National Guard? You mentioned that you would have handled it
mm,
differently, but then the Marines stepping it up a level. Like if you could call up President Trump and say, "Hey, I'd do this differently. Can you support me this way instead?" What would you have said to him?
well, first off, I would say, I wish you would have allowed the state to call in the National Guard, so they're under state control, not federal control. But I do appreciate them being there because it gives us a breather, right? They can go out and they can stand a post somewhere, and just as well as one of our people can. But due to our depleted nature, our folks can actually go home and be with their family for a little while, which they haven't been able to do because they are working mandated forced overtime of like triple double shifts all the time. I'm going to go on a soapbox here for a minute, because chronic sleep deprivation is one of the worst things that you can do to a human body. It doesn't give the brain a chance to refire itself. And they show that long-term sleep deprivation can lead to Alzheimer's and some cancers, high blood pressure, heart trouble, and then you start making bad decisions, and it just snowballs from there. But anyway, I'm really glad that the National Guard's there to help. I just wish that we had more local control. And I would like to think I have a telephone and I could probably call the president if I needed to and say, hey, Thanks for that, but can we drop it down to the state level? Because that way we'd have direct control over them.
And why do
You
you
know,
think he did not leave it at the state level?
I hate to say this, but I think he probably didn't think that the governor of the state would do the right thing, and he decided he was going to step in and do it. I do know early on, if you look at what was going on with ICE, the people that were there, they start getting attacked. And what does that do? Either, someone has to step in, and that's going to have to either be us or LAPD, the local law enforcement agency. And it drags us right into the mix, right? We're just like, oh, here we are. Now we're here seen as, protecting or working with ICE. We're not. We're defending them like we defend anybody else, like we defend the protesters that are out there. But
Yes.
go ahead.
Excuse me. So exactly
Mhm.
what do the Marines do then at this point? And how do you, as those agencies to the city, interact with the Marines? Who has the jurisdiction on the incident command system, if you will?
Well, that's a federal command system, and the Marine Corps, oversees the Marine Corps. I would like to think, I've heard some local officials, belly aching about it. And again, you have a telephone, call somebody or go over there, go to where the Marines are bivouacked, and hey guys, what's up? What's the plan? What are you doing? Right now, I haven't heard of them really getting involved. I think they're there just as a show of force of what could happen. I mean, if God forbid somebody declares martial law or something, which I'm confident it's not going to come to that.
Good.
Then the Marine Corps, yeah, right. Then the Marine
Good.
Corps would get involved, because they would be the federal peacekeepers, and I firmly believe they were brought down as just a show of what could happen, a show of force. I don't see them doing anything other than maybe outer perimeter, uh, posting. But there's enough National Guard to do that. There's enough law enforcement, local law enforcement to do that. I think these the sheriffs and the LAPD finally got their feet under them now after, my gosh, what, it's almost a week now.
Right.
They finally got their feet under them, but now they're doing these nightly curfews. I've got a friend who lives in that area, and he goes, "Man, he goes, this is not the LA that I knew, that I know, because you can't even go
Everyone goes
outside."
out. Yeah. Yeah. Everyone
Yeah,
goes out at
and
night. Right.
yeah, but who would want to go out right now though? There's just too much nonsense going on out there in the street.
So let me
But
ask you this: the police department downtown is contracted with you, the county, and the sheriff's department. Uh, what are you doing currently with the police department around this situation, despite the Marines being there?
right,
What's
well,
happening with the sheriff's department specifically?
yeah, well, it's not a contract, it's mutual aid. LA City has requested mutual aid from the sheriff's department. So we go there as a helping hand. We go there to help, mutual aid, just like if it was in the sheriff's area, we'd probably have to end up asking LAPD to come help us or other agencies. So what we're
Now,
doing now is,
who's in control of that though? When that happens, is it whoever
well,
calls you in, or is it
when it comes, if it's in the city of LA, then the chief of police and the sheriff will have a mutual command, right? That's what they'll do. They'll have a joint command. And if another agency gets involved, in fact, the chippies, the highway patrols, there a lot too. So highway patrol will be there, and the National Guard. It's a unified command structure. And right now we are doing the same thing the other agencies are. If they ask us to, form a line and block off a certain portion of the city streets, we'll do it. That's what we do. And, as long as everybody's peaceful and doing what we need them to do, we just hold that line, or maybe move the people to a different area, or hopefully they'll disperse. It looks like that dispersal order probably went out about an hour ago, right? Because I think it's 8 o'clock curfew, and we'll,
so?
we'll we'll see what happens.
You believe that the sheriff's department is for the people, correct?
Absolutely. No, no, wait a minute. I'm going to say it again. Not just for the people, we are the people. We're the same people you see in the store or going to the movies or going to a restaurant. We're the same people. And it's been really, it hangs heavy on my heart what's been going on the last couple of years, because I know what I went through to be on the department, and the sacrifices I made, for my family and everything, to go out and keep other people safe. And I know the heart of the people that work there. And to have them drag through what they've been going through is just incomprehensible.
And so you said that they're overworked, especially they're exhausted. Do you see that the issues that they're up against today are any different than they were previously? Is it a harder task to go out there today, or with the technologies that they have and you have now, are you supported in that? The attrition rate is going taking people away. However, is it a harder job today?
I'd say so. I would say that, and I'm gonna put it at the feet of the current sheriff. He has as much responsibility for what's going on as anybody else does. And I hear from a lot of folks that he's risk adverse. He won't make decisions. He delays and delays and won't stand up and full throated protect his folks and stand up for his folks. He's
Can he? And I'm going to ask the hard question. Can
I,
he?
I
Or
don't
is
think he,
he
I don't think he can. I don't think it's in his personality. From what I understand, he's a super nice guy, but super nice guys can go work somewhere else. You need somebody who's got a little bit more of a backbone and isn't afraid to take some of the heat for decision making. And I think that's where the problem comes in is he doesn't want to make a decision because it doesn't want it to come back and harm him in some way that he sees politically.
what's the greatest risk to your force in Los Angeles today
Mm.
besides attrition?
Well, if you distill it down, I've just had a conversation like this with somebody I know. I think it comes down to funding, to be honest with you, because if you want to combat fentanyl, you want to combat robberies, you want to have more people, you want to get new technology, you want to get the buses fixed, the communication system fixed. Everything you want to do comes down to one thing, and that's funding.
Mhm,
And the only thing that the board of supervisors hold sway over the department with, and that is the funding. And
mhm,
my understanding is that I've been told for decades that there's a structural deficit in the millions of dollars every year, like 350 million bucks. That was one of the numbers kicked around. And it's like, well, are we really at a structural deficit or are we just doing stupid spending? That's one of the first things that I'd want to look at is a complete forensic audit of every dime that's spent, not just how much is spent, where it's spent, and why it's spent. And I guarantee you there's things in there that made sense 5, 10, 20 years ago that make no sense today. And I
So,
guarantee you there's things that need to be looked at that aren't being funded or are severely underfunded.
okay, so how would you intend to go about that audit comprehensively? How would you
O-
handle that?
Okay, it'd be a three-step audit for me, and it would be the first one would be every dime, every category of everything we do. The courts, custody, patrol, detectives, everything. And then my team and I would go through and we'd sort out every single item, determine what needs to stay, what needs to go, what needs to wither, and what needs to grow. So, and then after I get that parsed out, I would actually take the entire package and I'd present it to the board of supervisors because they're the ones that hold the purse strings. And if I didn't take those steps first, they'd have every right in the world to throw me out of my ear because I wouldn't know what I'm talking about. Do we have a structural deficit? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I think if we're, well, this last year we paid uh, $500 million in overtime, $500 million in overtime, and that's a big chunk of money.
What's the
But
difference between having someone else on the force versus that overtime?
lots
Is
of
it
others on the force, yeah.
yeah.
But the sheriff's budget, I mean, it hovers around 4 billion with a B dollars, 4
Oh,
billion bucks. When I first came on back in 1850, I think it was like 1.2 billion. So it's grown. But
wow.
the responsibilities have grown too, and employee salaries and S&EB have grown. So I understand that, but I'm not confident that they're spending their money properly. And, once we get that sorted out, we'll go to the board and, I'd horse trade with them. We're doing this right now. We don't need to do it. Can we dump that and buy 15 extra buses or, 100 new radio cars with it? And, a lot of folks are, they bash the board all the time, and I haven't always been happy with them. But you know, I do believe in conflict resolution, and I do believe in working well with people. It's the word neutrality that you put out there at the beginning, because um, that's how you get things done. And it's just like when you enforce the law. See, this current sheriff, I think he's pandering to different factions, and he's not, working within the spirit of what the law is. And if people don't like a certain law or a certain set of laws, work to get them changed. But until then, the law enforcement agencies are duty bound to enforce the law. And that's what I would do, not left, not right, not Republican, not Democrat, whatever out there, it's just through the lens of doing law the right way and enforcing the law and protecting the people, right? It's not about party, it's about safety. And that is where I would hang my hat, and I'll die on that hill if I have to.
It sounds like a good position. Like I said, we do believe in neutrality here, and I think there, we think of what we've been through if you've lived on this planet longer than 30 years. And we have a little more experience in life itself and the changes that come up unexpectedly. But the youth who don't know better and come into a high tech society with a lot of confusion going on, it's really going to be up to them to kind of see that neutrality space. So, how
Mhm.
do you, with your background of tolerance education and the awards that you've won for the work that you've done, how do you bring that to the forefront if you become elected and can take that leadership into the next phase? How do you educate the public, not just inmates? How do you bring it back to the youth of this country?
Yeah, well, the proof's in the pudding. I think that what needs to be done is you need to reach out to the different, I hate to call them factions, the different age groups, of people, and be transparent in what you do, but don't be silly and don't pander to them. Don't tell them what you think they want to hear. Just be consistent with what you do and say, and that'll go a long way. I think that, um, you know, the kids today. I mean, I can call them all kids because I'm a lot older than they are, but we're talking even 30s and 40s. A lot of them, they don't know enough about law enforcement. They don't know what the sheriff's department does, because and I think it's an educational process where, just like anything else, it's let them know where we're coming from, let them know how we do it, why we do it, invite them along. We have ride along programs. Let them come ride along, man. take a
Hey, I want
take
to go. I want to
take
go
a
on your
shift.
ride along program.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so
yeah. Okay,
no,
they'll do it. Go to local station, sign up for it.
okay, I will. So tell me this though. What are those things? Let's list them out right now so as people listening can hear that. What are some of the things that we don't know about the sheriff's department that we should know about the sheriff's department?
I think one of the first things that people don't know, first of all, it's countywide. Even though there's a city law enforcement, the sheriff's department is the main. Like if a city went bankrupt, they wouldn't not have police. The sheriff would just step right in, right? So that's one thing. I don't think people also recognize the fact that the sheriff's department has patrol functions. We also work in the courts. We're the bailiffs. We manage all the jails. We have, helicopter units. We have dog units. We have mounted horse units. We have ocean-going units. Scuba divers. We have Marina Del Rey Station. We do it all. We are a one-stop shop law enforcement agency. We have mountain rescue. Um,
I didn't know
you
that.
you you name anything, and I'll tell you what, we're hip deep in it. When in times of disaster, we're there. And, and unfortunately, once when President Reagan shut the mental facilities back in the 80s, who became the de facto houser of people who are mentally ill and have mentally ill crisis? Sheriff's Department,
How's
which
that? Where?
it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but if let's say you've got some homeless people that are causing a ruckus, you're going to call us. If you got homeless people who aren't causing a ruckus that are just there, you're going to call us. And there are people that I don't I say we don't have a uh, a homeless crisis. We have a mental health crisis, I think,
Hmm.
in the county of Los Angeles, because I remember when we had like 25, 30,000 homeless. Now I think it's almost 70,000 in the county areas. And I don't see it getting any better anytime soon. You can only forcefully take someone against their will for 72 hours on a hold.
Hmm.
And there are people that it's like, brother, you're out here, you're starving, you don't have any clothes, you're not a feral cat, we need to help you out. And they don't want help. They don't want to stay somewhere. So that's
Hmm.
like with all the housing they're building, these apartments and this homeless this and homeless that. I just don't see it really bearing any fruit because a lot of those folks, given their druthers, want to be on the street. They want to roam where they want to roam. They want to do what they want to do. They want to go where they want to go. A lot of them have, they're mentally ill or they're addicted to something. Um, it's a tough problem, but it falls on the shoulders of law enforcement. A lot of them, it's not against the law. It's not a crime to be homeless, but we end up having a lot of people come through the system, for these petty crimes. The guys that are, I used to know this homeless guy back in one of the stations I worked at, and he would live on the streets, but then when it got cold or when it was Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, he'd go throw a rock through a window so he could have a warm place to stay and a hot meal for a couple of days. But then holidays over and no
Right.
charges or time served, and he's right back out. We collectively as a society, we need to really work on that and get that problem fixed.
Well, Captain Bornman, you are running for sheriff and you are looking to correct the system and looking to correct all that's happening in the Los Angeles County area as a whole. I'd
Hmm.
really like to have you back on and continue this conversation, go into the steps of things a little bit more. We'd like to learn on this side of the fence a little bit more about the sheriff's department as well. And maybe I can have that ride along first. And
Well, depending on where I think you're in LA County, right?
yes.
Okay, go to your local station and just say, "Hey, I want to sign up for a ride along," and you sign a waiver just in case.
Yes, you go on to something crazy while I'm there.
Yeah, but there's stations that have less activity, and there's stations that have a lot of activity on a daily basis. It all depends on your fear level and what you want to do.
Oh
But
my
start out
goodness.
easy. Go to one of the slower stations, and I think you'll enjoy it.
I think I would actually. I
Hmm.
appreciate all that you've done, and we want to thank you for your service, and then look forward to what you're going to do as you create reform. And I think that the actual, I'll call them soldiers on the street, if you will, they actually need your leadership. It looks like because from what's going on, there's a lot of chaos, and if it isn't
Yep.
corrected, what's going to happen? What's
Yep.
going to happen? So it's been an interesting conversation, and I appreciate this in a timely manner because we only just came together very quickly to do this, and I appreciate it.
Hmm.
But I'd like everyone to check out his Twitter feed, and you can see that here. We have so much really to kind of consider and cover what's going on in our nation, and like we've been talking about today, neutrality is our position, right? So neutrality is really where we want to be in everything. And if we're not in a neutral position, exactly what are we aiming for? So if you have final words, I'd like to hear kind of what you feel, Captain, about the state of our nation and where we're headed.
Oh man, that's a loaded question. You save that for the last one, right? I like where we're at as a nation. I think we're strong. I think that we'll see through any time. So one thing that really bothers me is this polarization that we have, not just uh, limited, but extreme polarization of left and right. A lot of people seem to be afraid to take that step back into the middle. I'm not. I think that's where we need to be. I think that we need to resolve our disagreements and conflicts by working together, not by working with each other, not talking about each other. So that's where I'm at. I'm hopeful. I'm positive, and I look forward to making change with the sheriff's department too.
Beautiful. And tell us what makes your life brighter.
My wife.
Beautiful. Good answer.
Yeah, she does, man. The reason
No,
I'm
that's
here,
great.
so
Wonderful. Thank you for your time today. Thank you everyone for listening and weighing in. I appreciate that. And we're going to have Captain Bornman on again if he'll be back with us, and we'll explore a little bit more after I do some more due diligence on the street.
right
So,
on.
right. Thank
Okay.
you so much. All right,
Sure.
everybody. Go jolly, as I say, and go out and make somebody else's life brighter. We deserve peace in this country, and we'll look forward to the next steps.
Thank you.